On a sweltering August day in 2020, a 25-year-old nurse embarked on her routine jog along the familiar rural road and vanished without a trace. There were no calls, no texts, and not the slightest indication of her whereabouts. Her phone became unresponsive, and her social media presence ceased abruptly. For her loved ones, this was the initial sign of a serious problem. For the residents of a small Arkansas town, it marked the beginning of the most extensive search effort in their community's history. No one could have foreseen that this case would unravel to include deception, a facade of respectability, covert surveillance, and a degree of cold calculation that defied explanation. At that moment, however, all that remained was an empty road, the fading evening light, and the stark reality of a young woman who did not return home. Sydney Sutherland was born in Grubbs, Arkansas, to a modest and tightly knit family. As the youngest of three, she shared a particularly strong bond with her mother, Maggie. Their relationship was characterized by daily communication, complete openness, and mutual support in all aspects of life. This profound connection shaped Sydney's character, fostering a sensitive, warm, and approachable demeanor. She excelled academically, maintained a humble disposition, and valued structure and routine, which led others to perceive her as highly reliable. From a young age, she possessed a deep-seated desire to help others, making her decision to pursue a career in nursing an expected one. After graduating from high school, Sydney enrolled in a medical program and subsequently began working at Harris Medical Center. There, she quickly distinguished herself as a caregiver who not only tended to patients' physical needs, but also provided a comforting presence. Beyond her professional life, she maintained a full personal life, residing with her partner, Alex, caring for their dogs, and cherishing time with her nephews, nieces, and family traditions. Physical fitness was integral to her lifestyle, serving as a means to manage stress and maintain equilibrium. In August of 2020, a family vacation to Florida provided a period of cherished memories, though they were unaware it would be their last together in that familiar context. Sydney returned from the trip feeling rejuvenated and prepared to resume her daily routine. Quake Llewellyn was a native of the same county, residing only a few miles from Grubbs. He belonged to a long-established farming family with substantial land holdings. The Llewellyns were well known and respected within the community, regarded as honest, diligent, and dependable individuals. In February of 2016, their contributions were formally recognized when they were named Farm Family of the Year in Jackson County. From a young age, Quake was involved in the family's agricultural operations, operating machinery, assisting with seasonal duties, and managing daily responsibilities. His background appeared unremarkable, with no record of legal infractions or complaints. Described by neighbors as quiet and reserved, he was known to be a loner who kept to himself and avoided drawing attention. While not sociable, his behavior did not elicit concern. It was perceived as reserved rather than alarming. The possibility that a more unsettling reality lay beneath this withdrawn exterior was never considered. Llewellyn provided no reason for suspicion, existing on the periphery of the community, out of sight, out of conflict, and beyond question. This very absence of warning signs proved to be the most dangerous illusion. On a scorching day in August of 2020, the paths of Sydney and Quake had not yet intersected. Their lives moved on parallel tracks. Hers was one of human connection, care, and trust. His was one of machinery, land, and solitude. The only commonalities they shared were their geographical proximity and the perceived safety of a small town where familiarity is assumed. However, fate was to bring their lives together in a manner no one could have anticipated. On August 19, 2020, the morning began uneventfully. Sydney Sutherland traveled to Jonesboro for a session with a personal trainer. Following the hour-long workout, she returned home. Security cameras recorded her exiting her vehicle, gathering her belongings, entering her house, and then re-emerging in athletic attire, appearing calm and confident with no signs of distress. Subsequently, Sydney visited her mother's home to deliver mail that had accumulated during their vacation. The visit was brief and the conversation casual. She mentioned her intention to bake cookies or brownies and her plan to go for a run. Her mother advised against it, noting that she had already exercised and the day was exceptionally hot. Sydney responded with a smile, explaining the run was more for relaxation than a strenuous workout. They parted with their customary exchange of "love you" and "talk soon." Upon returning home, cameras again captured her checking her Apple Watch, which she used to track her running metrics. Around 2:30 p.m., she set out on her run along Highway 18, a familiar route between Newport and Grubbs characterized by open fields, minimal traffic, and a well-maintained surface. At approximately the same time, Quake Llewellyn was driving his pickup truck on the same highway when he observed a woman running. She displayed no signs of distress. He drove past her, then turned his vehicle around, returned to the same section of road, and began to observe her. He reduced his speed as she continued her run, seemingly unaware of any threat. Without warning, Llewellyn steered his truck directly into Sydney, striking her. He would later admit to using his vehicle as a weapon. The impact was severe, throwing her to the ground and leaving her critically injured and incapacitated. Immediately following the collision, he exited his truck, placed her body in the vehicle's bed, and drove away. He left the main highway for a dirt road leading to his family's farmland, stopping in a secluded location. It was there that he sexually assaulted her while she was in a semi-conscious state. He provided no medical assistance for her multiple, ultimately fatal injuries. Instead of fleeing or seeking help, Llewellyn dug a shallow grave nearby on the same land his family had cultivated for years, placed her body inside, and covered it with dirt. He then returned to his truck and drove home, where he showered, changed his clothes, and concealed his soiled garments in a laundry hamper at his mother's house. Although he would later claim he acted out of panic, his actions were methodical and calculated. He did not disclose the events to anyone and resumed his daily activities as if nothing had occurred, having dinner with his family and answering phone calls with a calm demeanor. For hours, he exhibited no signs of distress, and those around him had no reason to suspect he had just committed and concealed a violent crime. When Sydney Sutherland did not return home on the evening of August 19th, her partner, Alex, was not immediately concerned. He initially waited, as occasional delays in their communication were not unusual. However, as 30 minutes stretched into an hour with no calls or messages and her phone directed calls to voicemail, his concern grew. Alex knew her unresponsiveness was out of character, as she was consistently reachable, even during workouts. He began to worry that her phone battery had died, but as more time passed, his unease intensified. His repeated calls, messages, and checks for online activity went unanswered. The persistent silence became increasingly alarming. Alex contacted Sydney's mother, Maggie, who confirmed she had seen her daughter earlier that day and that everything had appeared normal. Maggie had assumed Sydney had completed her run and returned home safely. Upon learning that Sydney was unreachable, she too became worried. They both began contacting friends and family, none of whom had heard from her. That evening, Alex officially reported Sydney missing, convinced that something was seriously wrong. Sydney was not one to disappear without informing someone of her plans. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office treated the report with immediate seriousness. The sheriff, who knew the family personally and had watched Sydney grow up, did not believe she had left voluntarily and initiated an official search by the morning of August 20th. All available resources, including local law enforcement, state investigators, and federal agents, were mobilized. The search operation quickly grew into one of the largest in the county's history. Volunteers and police thoroughly combed the area where Sydney was last seen running. Community members, including men, women, teenagers, and retirees, participated, with some taking time off from work to assist. With more than 300 people involved, the search proceeded with a sense of urgency, starting with Sydney's jogging route and checking roadside ditches and tree leans. Concurrently, authorities began to analyze digital evidence. Sydney had been wearing an Apple Watch and carrying her iPhone, which proved to be critical. Investigators obtained geolocation data from her cellular provider and Apple, which pointed to a specific area along the highway between Newport and Grubbs where she was last seen. A delivery driver corroborated this information, reporting that he had seen Sydney running alone on August 19th and had not noticed anything unusual. This testimony helped to narrow the search area, allowing teams to focus their efforts. On the morning of August 20th, a group of volunteers discovered Sydney's iPhone lying in the grass not far from her home. The device was undamaged and appeared to have been intentionally placed there rather than accidentally dropped. Forensic analysis later confirmed the phone had been moved from its original location. At this juncture, the investigation shifted from a missing person case to a potential criminal matter. All individuals who were in the vicinity during that time frame became persons of interest. Dozens of people were questioned, including Quake Llewellyn. He presented himself at the station voluntarily, stating he had seen Sydney and wished to assist the investigation. He claimed she had been running alone and appeared fine, and he offered his help. His initial statement did not raise suspicion. He consented to a search of his truck, and his father raised no objections. During the examination of the truck bed, investigators discovered traces of blood. This finding represented the first major inconsistency in Llewellyn's account, as he had not mentioned any physical contact. The presence of blood transformed the vehicle from an incidental element to a potential instrument in a crime. Investigators proceeded to examine Llewellyn's digital footprint. His phone's location data revealed that on the day of Sydney's disappearance, his movements mirrored hers with remarkable precision, indicating a direct overlap rather than a coincidence. Further evidence emerged from security cameras on the Llewellyn family farm, which recorded footage of Quake's vehicle leaving the property and later returning. The return footage showed the truck bed covered by a tarp, beneath which a large, previously absent shape was visible. This evidence was sufficient for investigators to conclude that his version of events was inconsistent with the facts. Faced with mounting evidence, Quake Llewellyn's composure began to falter during questioning. Initially, he maintained his denial of any involvement. He then admitted to an accident, claiming he had unintentionally struck Sydney, attributing the collision to road dust, poor visibility, and panic. He acknowledged placing her body in his truck and driving away, stating he did not know what to do and therefore did not call for help. He attempted to frame his actions as a result of fear and confusion. However, under continued pressure from investigators, his story changed. He admitted to removing her clothing, concealing her body, and burying her. He also disclosed that he had hidden the clothes he was wearing at the time of the crime in a laundry hamper at his mother's house. These were not the actions of someone in a state of panic, but rather a deliberate effort to conceal evidence and obstruct the investigation. During a search of his mother's residence, authorities discovered key evidence, including a black shirt and a pair of shorts belonging to Quake. Forensic analysis of the clothing revealed strands of Sydney's hair, which was later confirmed by DNA testing. This physical evidence directly linked him to the crime scene. The investigation's components, witness statements, blood evidence, GPS data, and surveillance footage formed a cohesive and compelling chain of evidence. It became evident that Quake Llewellyn not only possessed knowledge of the events, but had actively worked to conceal his involvement from the outset. Following the discovery of this evidence, Quake was brought in for a second interrogation. Under increased pressure, investigators confronted him with the facts: the GPS coordinates from his phone, the surveillance video from the farm, the blood traces in his truck, and the concealed clothing. His initial story of a tragic accident was no longer tenable. Though he attempted to maintain his composure, he began to contradict himself. When directly questioned about his actions after hitting Sydney, Quake admitted to transporting her body to a secluded field on his family's property. There, he removed her clothing and sexually assaulted her. When asked if she was alive at the time, he provided an unclear answer, stating only that it happened quickly and felt like a fog. He then buried her in a shallow grave, confident the location would not be discovered, admitting he had chosen the spot in advance due to his intimate knowledge of the land. Afterward, he returned home, placed his clothes in a laundry basket, showered, and had dinner, behaving as if it were a normal evening. His tone throughout the confession remained disturbingly detached. On August 21, 2020, 3 days after Sydney Sutherland's disappearance, the search concluded. Law enforcement officers and investigators arrived at the location Quake Llewellyn had described, an isolated field on his family's property, far from main roads and accessible only to those with an intimate knowledge of the terrain. At the exact spot he indicated, they found an area of recently disturbed soil. Beneath the earth, they uncovered Sydney's body. Crime scene experts began processing the scene. The grave was shallow, suggesting it was not intended for long-term concealment. The body was found in a contorted position, partially clothed. The physical evidence before the investigators corroborated every detail of his confession. The forensic examination determined the cause of death to be multiple injuries resulting from blunt force trauma, delivered with significant force by hands and feet. Some wounds indicated a struggle. The examination revealed that death was not instantaneous. The evidence confirmed the crime occurred in stages. Sydney was first injured when struck by the vehicle, then transported, sexually assaulted, and finally subjected to the fatal blows. Immediately following the recovery of her body, Quake Llewellyn was formally arrested and charged with first-degree murder, sexual assault, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse, all serious felonies supported by his confession, forensic proof, and multiple witness statements. For the Sutherland family, the discovery confirmed their worst fears, extinguishing any lingering hope. The news that Sydney's body had been found buried near her lifelong home devastated not only her family, but the entire Grubbs community. Those who had participated in the search, volunteers, healthcare workers, and school teachers, felt the loss personally. The most difficult aspect for many was the realization that the individual responsible had been among them, interacting with her loved ones while feigning a desire to help. Following his arrest, Quake Llewellyn displayed no remorse. He made no public statements, offered no apologies, and provided no explanation for his actions. His demeanor remained calm and distant. Transporting officers later noted his lack of any apparent confusion or anxiety. He did not attempt to justify his actions or retract his confession, confirming the details without emotion. Investigators compiled a comprehensive timeline of events, from the moment Sydney departed for her run to the final geolocation ping from her Apple Watch and the discovery of her body. Each step of the sequence was meticulously confirmed. The strength of the evidence was such that a strong case could have been built even without his confession. Upon completion of the investigation, Quake Llewellyn's case was transferred to the Jackson County District Court. His defense team recognized the high probability of a guilty verdict from a jury, which could have resulted in a death sentence. Consequently, the defense filed a motion for a psychiatric evaluation. The assessment, which took several months, concluded in February of 2021 that Quake Llewellyn was competent to stand trial, possessing a full understanding of his actions and their consequences. The examining psychiatrist reported that Llewellyn did not suffer from any severe mental disorders, noting his emotional detachment, but not classifying it as a mitigating psychological condition. He exhibited no remorse or sympathy for the victim's family. Investigators confirmed that his behavior after the crime, showering, dining with family, was indicative of a normal routine. The prosecution offered a plea agreement, an admission of guilt in exchange for taking the death penalty off the table. This option was discussed at length with Sydney's family, who wished to avoid a prolonged trial, repeated testimony, and the public recounting of the graphic details of the crime. In a painful yet practical decision, they agreed to a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. On October 1, 2021, Quake Llewellyn officially pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and kidnapping. 2 additional charges were dismissed as part of the agreement. In the courtroom, Sydney's parents and close family members were present. During the victim impact statements, her mother addressed Llewellyn directly, demanding he look at her as she spoke of the profound loss he had inflicted. Her voice trembled, but her words were resolute. Sydney's father also spoke, calling Llewellyn a coward and emphasizing the deliberate nature of his actions. The family's statements focused on justice rather than revenge, conveying the immense depth of their grief. Sydney's story serves as a sobering reminder that danger can exist in plain sight, concealed behind a facade of complete normalcy.